Shalom and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. This is a recording from our Passover Prep Learning Series.
Because it's so few of us, which is actually pretty awesome, we can talk about like what you're looking for in having a creative Seder. And before we do that, I'll just kind of share with you some of the staples that I use. Really, this comes from my parents. Last year, when I taught this class, I taught it with my mom. Because my parents are both educators, and my mom, ever since I can remember, has always done a creative Seder. It doesn't matter if there are kids around or not. She just feels like Passover is really ripe for creativity. And so she has kind of put in my mind this idea that creating a Seder is not just, oh, let's open a book and let's read what the book says, but really, who's coming? How can we make it interactive? So as you'll see here, and those of you who are listening on the podcast, you can't see, but just imagine, these are just many different Haggadot that over time I have collected and used, and some of them you'll see tabs in. I've used them for different things. Sometimes this is the Haggadah that my family uses every year. It's the conservative movement's Haggadah. And this was the Haggadah that I grew up using, which is, I don't even know who it's by, but it's just.
I think it's Birnbaum.
I don't see Birnbaum on here. It says Ktav Publishing House.
Goldberg. It's Goldberg.
Okay, great. Yeah, it's the one with the goat on the back, or
that was the one
animal on the back.
When we first started making Seders.
Right. So this is the Haggadah that I used. Growing up at Sinai Kibbutz, this was the Haggadah that we used when we did model Seders. So these are really the two.
Complete.
Right, right, and it's not as brief as the Maxwell, which I have there. So, in some families, you use just one Haggadah. One of the things that I've tried to do, if I'm having Passover Seder with people who can stand this, I give everybody a different Haggadah. Because one of the things that's so cool about Passover is that each Haggadah, but also each family, does things a little bit differently. So, for example, if I have this graphic novel Passover Haggadah, and someone else has the feminist Haggadah, and someone else has the Agam Haggadah, when we get to Karpas, they're going to look very different. And so the conversation around the table ends up being, well, what does Karpas say for you versus what does Karpas say for you? And it kind of writes itself, as opposed to having to kind of contrive questions or activities around certain parts of the Seder. So that's one way of that's creativity without you really doing much work, except for buying the different Haggadot.
You have to keep everybody on the same track.
Right.
That's a lot of work.
I think
that's
does help a lot.
Yeah.
If you have a group of people familiar with the Seder, so that it's like, okay, everybody, find the 4 questions, and you're not reading page 20 in this book and page, 42 in that.
Right. I mean, here we can do the activity now. Like you just everyone take a different Haggadah. It's actually, I'm not sure if this is just a.
This is the worst Haggadah.
And Norm has the worst Haggadah.
I do.
So if we were going through a Seder, for example, let's say we're at Magid. So go to Magid, wherever that is in your Haggadah. Wait.
It's page 126.
See, that is the biggest issue, is that you don't have the same page numbers. So
it is obviously Seder.
Yeah.
There is an order to it. So people are going to find it if you say.
Totally. Right. So if you start with Kadesh, for example, then, you're going to follow along. But, the Haggadah that Norm has versus the Haggadah that Rachel has, one is just kind of the traditional bare bones. There's really no.
I would never refer to this as traditional.
Really?
This particular Haggadah, never.
It's not. Which one did I give you?
Haggadah for the American family.
Oh, I didn't give you the Maxwell. I thought I gave you the Maxwell.
Maxwell House is a fine traditional Haggadah.
Yeah. So great. But that is a bare bones Haggadah.
Yes.
And then, which is also Maxwell House is also very bare bones. And then, which is what I thought I handed you. And then Rachel has Hogwarts, right? So we have
Where did you get this?
Amazon.
Archer is
Amazon.
Like
Yeah, that's what Norm
It's a
said.
great up-and-coming gift for Archer.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
Yes.
So, I could say, okay, we're going to turn to the four children and let's see what they look like in these different Haggadot. So, I have to find it in my own.
You're looking for the 4 questions or sons?
4 sons. Did anybody find your 4 sons yet?
Oh, sure.
Okay, great. So what does it look like in yours, Natalie?
Well, I have the Agam Haggadah.
Yeah.
So the picture, the artwork is really beautiful.
Yes, it
You can
is.
see, it really is.
Yeah.
The Torah has 4 sons in mind: the wise son, the wicked, the simple son, and the son who does not know how to ask.
Great.
And then the next page has, what does the wise son say? What does the wicked one say? There's a little bit of for everybody. For that, there is a lot of Hebrew too.
Yeah. Well, it was probably published in Israel, given where Agam is. But great. Okay. So that's going to be much more artistic. Aaron, what's yours?
I don't know. It seems sort of like pretty straightforward.
Uh-huh.
It has some biblical references,
Yeah,
like the
that's
wise
what
son, Devarim 6:20, wicked son, Exodus 13:8. So I haven't seen that before.
Great. So that one's maybe a little bit more of like a study
And then-
type.
Yeah, and then on the next page, it has like this big matrix of like where I guess the sources for the wicked son, and then it references the son's request, the Torah's answer, the Haggadah's answer, and it's got all sorts of things.
And as you can see, I've used that before because I have a little Post-it note on it. Yeah.
What do you think you used it for?
I used it when I was describing the 4 sons, actually, because 2 of the sons are very similar, and I used that as the way of finding the sources for it.
The symbol and the one who does not know what to ask?
No, it's the Rasha and the. Look at it. I don't know off the top of my
Isn't there
head.
wise and Rasha? Like, how could you say it?
Because their questions are the same. So here, come from the same place.
Would have to be the wicked and the simple.
So it's the wicked and the one who does not know how to ask. They have the same, proof text. And so what does that say about those 2 sons? Great. AJ, what is yours? Yours is the feminist Haggadah? Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
not even, okay.
Are the 4 children even in there?
4 daughters, not the 4 sons.
No, I didn't do it that way.
Oh, what do they do?
Well, it went from 4 questions.
Uh-huh.
Blah, 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 blah. There's really no mention of, here we go. So at the very bottom, Torah and the sages speak of 4 sons who asked about the meaning of Passover ritual. The 4 sons say it in 4 different ways, and so ask diverse questions.
Okay.
The women, however, have other questions, and they go on.
Great.
No. In other words, okay, yeah, it's kind of about the same thing, but it really goes
In a different direction. So for some, families, that's going to be a wonderful way of bringing in the women. And for some families, that's going to feel like a real stretch, right? Let's just talk about the 4 children. The Haggadah that my grandparents often use is the Mas Haggadah, which is a very special, I don't have it in my office, but a very special, beautiful art piece made by David Mas. And the 4 children, they, when you look at the page in the Haggadah, there are mirrors so that you can see yourself in the child. And it's a real, I don't know when he finished it, but it's a beautiful, beautiful Haggadah. And you can my grandparents have an original, but you can also buy a copy. The original is paper cut, so it's very fragile. And then the copy is, it looks like this, like it's printed. But it's gorgeous. But anyway, so there are this one actually has one of my favorite depictions of the four sons. And what it shows you is that each child is within the other child. You just have to find the ways in which they're compared. So anyway, that's just an example of one, albeit simple way of making your Passover Seder creative without really putting much work into it other than buying some books.
One of the nice things about the night to remember is he has several different, it's over here in this corner.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
He has several different depictions of the four sons taken from other Haggadahs, and you can look at them and see and discuss them.
Yeah, that's great. Rabbi Klickfeld and I were actually using this on the bus in whatever city we were in when we were working on. Oh, yeah, you're right. When we were working, so that's the Haggadah we were just looking at is also in this Haggadah. To create our Seder.
On the page, you'll see other ones, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was when we
escaped the tornado.
The weather.
Yes, escaping the tornado with an emergency hatch that flew off. Okay. But
this last trip.
Oh yes, sure was. Yeah, the three of them. He was on it for New Orleans.
Okay.
The fun part.
Okay, so yeah, exactly. So okay, so I want to just pass out a few things. And I really thought that everyone was going to have to share, but I made exactly enough copies for every household to have their own. So this is the order of the Seder, which obviously is, pretty well known. In my family, we sing through it. So every time we get to the next item of the Seder, we sing the next thing. So we start off the whole Seder by singing Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, et cetera, and then we sing Kadesh, and we stop, and then we go to the next thing. Urchatz, come on in.
Thank you.
Here you go. And so you can go through it. It's a nice way of, connecting whoever is at your table, whatever age they are, to know, what's the next thing we're getting to? What are the things that we've already accomplished? So the different parts of the Seder that you could make creative is you can make a poster board and have Velcro pieces. In my family, sometimes my mom will pass out the different parts of the Seder on pieces of cardstock. And so who has Kadesh, you have to kind of pay attention, and then you go up to the board and you put it on with Velcro. And then there's also a visual of all the steps that you've gone through in the Seder. Some of this stuff will sound like, oh, that would be great for kids. It's also great for adults, because by the time you get to the end of the Seder, you're just trying to come up with ways to keep people engaged and excited. So if you have different parts of the Seder that this is my part, if you're having an all-adult Seder, one of the ways that you could do that is give the parts of the Seder actually ahead of time. Ron Wolfson talks about this in an article that I'll hand out in a second. You can give parts of the Seder ahead of time and say, okay, Roger, you're in charge of Yachatz, right? And before the Seder actually even starts, Roger's come up with a way that he's going to share with the table a little bit about Yachatz. And so it takes a little bit of the pressure off of the person leading the Seder, and it also allows you to be kind of creative. So my family always invites this particular family to our house, and the husband of the family is an actor. And so every year, whatever part of the Seder that we give him, he writes a poem, and it's beautiful. And so every year we have a different poem for a different part of the Seder that Dan's written. So you could give out, if you know who's coming and you know that they're competent enough to just Google something, right? It doesn't have to be that they're some kind of scholar, but they could look up a parody if they want to sing something, or they could write something, or they could have a little drash that they give, whatever you want. And that could be their part of the Seder. And that's also a nice way, if you're leading both nights, especially, to not feel like you have to kind of be on for both nights, because then there are other people who are going to also contribute to your Seder.
Can you talk about how you integrate those little acts?
Pieces?
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. So, when you get to that part of the Seder, then you would say, if Roger has Yachatz, you would say, okay, Who?
That are easy.
Yeah.
But if it's not if it's a poem that doesn't pertain to yachats or part of the order, is there, I guess everything pertains to the order?
So the way that I've done it and the way that my family has done it is that we give out parts of the Seder, never Magid, because, we don't want someone to feel like they have to take on the biggest part of the Seder, but we'll give out karpas, or we'll give out yachat, or we'll give out rachta even, and we'll say, okay, this is your part of the Seder. This is what that part of the Seder is. Come up with a way to take us through that part of the Seder. So the poem would be part of explaining what that part of the Seder is about. Yeah, Natalie.
Weeds kind of thing.
Yeah.
But there's about 15 things listed here, and you're not going to give out Magi,
right.
So you have suggested, how would you
have more
if you
people?
have 20 people or 22?
So you could break down Magi for sure. You could give someone the plagues, or you could give someone the 4 children. I just wouldn't say to one person or one family, you take Magi.
I have another idea for something, that is that when you get to Rabban Gamliel says we have to talk about Pesach Matzah more. I don't think the Haggadah does a very good job of that. But you can give 3 people in advance the assignment to explain Matzah, to explain more, to explain Pesach.
Yeah.
And that takes
that's
care
3
of 3
people right there.
And it solves a part of the Haggadah that's sort of boring.
Yeah. Wait, actually, as a nice little plug, next week, I think a week from today, Thursday night, the clergy and rabbinic residents are doing a Haggadah slam on Pesach Matzah Maror for exactly that reason, that there's not usually enough done around it. And so we're gonna, in Chavrutas, so I'm working with Jackie Honig, Rabbi Klickfeld's working with David Kaplinsky, and Cantor Charney and Rabbi Shapiro working together, are going to kind of give us different ways of getting into that part of the Seder.
Is that a program we attend or watch on Zoom?
Attend. We're going to have people attend it, but hopefully if the weather's okay outside. But next Thursday.
That's the next in this series.
Yeah, next Thursday at 7.
I mean, I guess you could also just get creative, like we're talking about, just make other things up, ask somebody to bring, talk about, do a little research on how other cultures, do some other culture's way of doing something at their Seder for Pesach.
Yeah, I mean, depending on how much you want to also get involved in activities. There was one year that my mom had us actually make charoset before we ate it. And it could be from different, have a charoset bar almost. And so you could take the different things that make the charoset that, my family's used to, which is the Ashkenazi, apples and nuts and wine, right? And you can just do that. Or you can do it like the Sephardim do with dates and figs and all those kinds of things. There's also a savory, not actually savory, but there's olives in it. It's an interesting one. I forget where that's from. Maybe Yemen. I don't remember. But for sure, you could make it not have to necessarily do with a part of the Haggadah, or part of the Seder, I should say, but an element of taking something from the Passover Seder and making it a little bit more, and taking it a little bit more in depth. For sure. I like that idea a lot.
Your ideas of the assignments are really intriguing.
Great.
Talk about ages and abilities, and
sure.
What you think are appropriate to assign to what age of kids.
Totally. So I would say that when you're assigning a part of the Seder, especially if you're assigning it to a family and not to just a person, knowing how old those kids might be. So if you have little kids, I would say good parts of the Seder to assign to them are motzi, because they know how to sing ha motzi lechem min haaretz, right? They can do that. Another really good part are the plagues or the song Dayenu, if they know those kinds of things. Another really good one is rachsa, because they can wash their hands. Those things are really good that, the parent could potentially explain, but the kid would actually do or showcase. the parts of the Seder that I wouldn't give to young kids, just because, at least in my experience, they don't stay at the table for very long, are anything after dinner. So they're going to go off and find the Afikomen, and then they're going to be done with you. So any of those songs, actually, Rabbi Kligfeld and I at our second night Seder here at Beth, we're going to be singing those songs at the beginning of the Seder, because we're starting before we can actually do the first cup of wine. So we're going to be taking those songs that have, no halachic requirement as to when you sing them, and sing them at the beginning and do a little like skit with the kids and whatnot. So if you want to do that, you could include the kids, but if you're going to keep everything in order, I would do the parts that are experiential and creative. One of the things I'm going to send to everybody that I didn't bring to hand out is there's a Google folder that has stickers you can print out that my mom made, and little she made a Curious George Haggadah that you could give if you have a kid who's interested in the book Curious George. So there are certain things, if you have kids who are like in middle school, you could do plays. I have one of them right here that I'll hand out. That's always a good one to do. The making of the charoset is a really fun thing for kids to do, so they could be in charge of that. Messy, but fun. Those are some of my ideas.
The Sunshines have a set of drawings that their kids made.
Oh, cute.
30 plus years ago.
Wow.
When they were in third or fourth grade.
Sure.
For each step in Who Knows One.
Oh, wow.
So.
That's very funny.
One person holds up 2 tables of the covenant.
Yeah.
The 2 tablets and
gets to answer that line.
Gets to answer
That's
that
awesome.
line, and one has the 11 stars in Joseph's dream and holds up that, and
that's great.
So it kind of skips around the table.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that actually reminds me that if you're going through Magid and there are kids at the table, I didn't even start with this. My family doesn't even sit at a table. We sit in the living room on the floor with pillows and blankets because, first of all, it's the easiest way for us to get 50 people in our house because we can't do that in our dining room. But most of them are little tushes because we have little kids. But and it's no longer 50. It used to be when I was a kid. But we would take all the living room furniture out, and we would sit on the floor, and my mom would have appetizers. As Karpas happened, she would have appetizers in the other room that you would bring into the living room in to-go boxes, because we were all Israelites trying to get out very fast. So you needed to-go boxes. So like cute things like that tell the story, even in just the gimmicks, that you're putting together. But what I was going to say is, if you're doing Magi with kids, one of the fun things to do is find stuff. It doesn't have to be toys, but find things that you can throw out. This is also really fun for adults, but people are not always as excited to do this for adults, to throw at your audience members, let's call them, for the different elements of the plagues. So for blood, you might throw like a Band-Aid, or for Svardeya, you might give a little toy frog, or for Choshech, you might have sunglasses. And then the kids have a bag and they get to collect all of the plagues. So now they have basically fidgets to play with for the rest of the Seder, but that are specific to the plagues. So it's not just you're giving them toys to let them go out and play, but you're making it very specific to the plagues. You can also do that with adults. I mean, with adults, you could have even more fun with it because they could be a little bit more. I'm
actually thinking of doing it backwards. Where you give a bag of these items and have them match the items to the play.
Great. That's like, for adults, that would be a great way of doing it, because then there's also that creativity of like what goes with what. And they could even be random items. They don't have to be very specific to the plagues. I think that's a great idea. Yeah, Aaron.
Just on the song thing, I was intrigued by that because it's always like, Dayenu and Haggadah and everything just like that's way at the end, and you've lost half the people by then, and it's sort of, spirited. But can any of those be done at the beginning? Is there anything that can't be?
No, anything in Nirtza can be done at the begining because they're just the last part of the Seder. Everything after Birkat Hamazon.
Everything. I was seeing because isn't there Hallel after Birkat Hamazon?
There is Hallel. Even some of the Hallel songs can be done before because you're not doing Hallel like you do Hallel, in shul. So you're not doing it with a blessing. Some people, like Rabbi Klickfeld and I aren't going to do all of the Hallel pieces in the beginning because we do want to do Hallel in its correct place. But you could sing if you wanted to, like Min HaMeitzar at the beginning. If that was a really good song that you wanted to be able to sing with everybody, you could sing that at the beginning without any halachic issue. But anything in Nirtza for sure, like Kilo Na'eh or Adir Hu or Echad Miodea, that's the Who Knows One, Chagadia, all of those things, all of that can happen at the beginning because they're just cultural songs. It's like singing, like Old MacDonald. Like you can sing it whenever you want. There are many pieces of the Seder actually that can be done out of order. The thing that people, my family did the Seder out of order last year because it was also on a Saturday night. And though the rest of my family doesn't care about this, I wanted to start the Seder on time. But we have little kids. And so when you have little kids and you want to do candlelighting at the right time, that means that you're starting the Seder about an hour and a half before actual candlelighting. So you have to figure out creatively what can you do that gets some of the pieces done before candlelighting that, according to Jewish law, you can do before the second day starts. And that then after candlelighting and it's not candlelighting, it's Havdalah, but after you do the first cup of wine, then you can finish the rest of the Seder. So certain things like, so Rabbi Klickfeld and I actually had a debate about this on the bus, because karpas you technically can do before you do the first cup of wine. Because what is karpas? It's just eating vegetables and saying the blessing. It's really not. If I were to eat a carrot right now, it's the same as me doing karpas at a Seder. The blessing's the same, the eating is the same. Now, the dipping is obviously not the same, right? The dipping you do only on Passover. So if you wanted to, you could do the blessing over like the carrots or whatever you're going to have for karpas, and then do the actual ritual karpas later.
We do karpas early.
Yeah.
Kind of hold
exactly.
Kids on.
Totally. So it's technically okay to do because again, it's not contingent upon the Seder moment, right? You wouldn't want to do yachats. You wouldn't want to break the matzahs. You wouldn't even want to bring the matzahs out, right? You wouldn't want to acknowledge the matzahs before the first cup of wine, but you can do olive nirtza. You can do parts of Magi. You can sing Dayenu. You can, you probably don't want to do like the Pesach Matzah Maror before the Seder actually begins. But you can definitely tell the story. I mean, you can tell the story on a random Monday. So there are parts of the Seder that are connected to cups of wine. And so you wouldn't want to do those before the Seder actually begins. But there are definite parts of the Seder that can be done before it starts. And once you start to figure out the things that you can do before it actually starts, you really don't have so much to do once it actually begins. You drink wine quite quickly because you get to the second cup a little bit faster, but yeah, and completely halachically fine, as long as you're okay that, the word Seder means order and you're kind of unsadering it.
Yeah, I was going to say it's slowly Seder.
Yeah.
I have two questions.
Yeah.
I mean, right now, potentially,
yeah,
our youngest person is like 16 already.
Right.
So
right.
I think that, like, my question, I have two questions.
Yeah.
One is, there's going to be probably half the people at our Seder who don't know a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing. They can all go on and do some research and everything.
Totally.
And I think everyone will be interested in that. But one, like, is there anything that you have to add about people whose Jewish knowledge about Judaism is, much less.
Yeah.
And then the second thing is, maybe you were going to get to it, but like stuff that it has discussion prompts that have to do with like freedom and relating to what's happening today in the world, or like making the story and everything like relevant about the larger theme.
Yeah, for sure. So it's interesting that was your second question, because the first question that you had, that was actually going to be one of my ideas. I think for people who are less knowledgeable about the Seder itself, if they are knowledgeable about what's going on in the world, that's actually a really beautiful way of them connecting to whatever prompt you're going to give them, right? What does it mean to celebrate, spring vegetables by doing karpas, right? If someone is a gardener, and so they can talk about how the only reason that came to mind is because that's what we did last year with one of our family friends who became, during COVID, quite the green thumb, and she was very excited about gardening and figuring out how to do those things. And so when we got to karpas, she actually brought from her home multiple things that could be considered karpas that we just would have never even thought of, but she knew that they were based on how they grew. So right now, obviously there's a lot to be said about freedom and, celebrating Passover in a time that's not so free for a lot of people. So Rachel actually was part of a 1LA program that we did last year about human trafficking, right? And talking about how does human trafficking really connect to a lot of what we're talking about in terms of slavery in our own narrative. Having just come from the South, that's also something that, we talked a lot about as well. So just the idea of like modern day slavery, you could definitely give that to people who are not as connected to Passover or even Judaism. But the theme of slavery is one that, people connect to on all different kinds of levels. I mean, it might be actually very interesting for someone like Gabe to talk about how, his culture versus his religion of choice now, how does that, and his race, how does that feel for him if he's comfortable in that? I don't know if he would be.
Another thing that's good for a newcomer is there's a line in the Haggadah that says everybody should regard themselves as if they had come out from slavery, and I will arrange with somebody in advance. I would never spring on them unexpectedly and turn to them at that point and say, and what was it like for you when we came out of Egypt? And you sometimes get absolutely amazing responses, but plan it with one or two people in advance. Don't just spring it on them.
The other thing I was going to say is that the last time that I did this kind of, give everybody a different Haggadah was actually when I had conversion students. When I was in Northern California and I was leading a Seder and I had conversion students, because I could choose which Haggadah they got. And I actually think I gave one of them that Haggadah, like something that was a little bit more basic in terms of the language on the page, but really beautiful and ripe for interpretation. And so you don't have to know a ton about Judaism or the ritual of Passover to be able to look at something beautiful and say, this is what I see in this art piece. So those are the things that I would do for someone who's not as knowledgeable. The other thing is that that's what Passover is all about, right? Passover is this holiday that's supposed to be us bringing people to a story and to a tradition and to rituals that allow them to understand how we got here today. And so much of what we're supposed to do at a Seder, which we forget because we overprogram it, but so much of what we're supposed to do is ask questions, and not necessarily have the answers, but have questions floating at the table.
I've done that. We have done that before.
Yeah.
I've been to classes where the synagogue poses on paper a bunch of questions that you can ask.
Right. So that's the other thing. You could have questions just kind of written all over the table, right? Like on index cards or something, and see if any of those questions pop up in a part of the Seder that would be curious for people to ask.
I want to talk about books.
Yeah.
We use the yellow and orange one.
Yes.
For the last 30 years.
Yeah.
more.
Yeah.
And my kids complain about it year after year. It's so boring. And my response is, it's the graphic arrangement.
Yeah.
It was terrific.
Mm-hmm.
So it survives. The important things are bigger type, the others are smaller.
Sure.
And so on. Is there something that is a good tool like that's a bit, without being a big book, but something you can buy in quantity that is equivalent to that?
Yeah.
In organization, it's well organized.
Yeah. So I think, this one doesn't have the same kind, you can look at it. It doesn't have the same kind of tight font that you're talking about, but things are bolded.
Got it.
That are, you have this one?
Yeah, we got so many.
Oh, okay. So this one I think is pretty user friendly. Many people are now not actually buying the books. I like buying the books, but a lot of people are going on to what's called Haggadah.com, or Haggadot.com. I'll look it up in a second. I think it's Haggadot, actually.
Yeah, I think
and first of all, you can print out a Haggadah that's already been made, or you can create your own by moving things around. That all of the text is already there for you, but you can move stuff around. You can add pictures. You can add text and drashot about more modern day interpretations of certain things, and you can then print a Haggadah that is completely yours, that you've now made based on a theme or whatever. I can send you all that information after the class. I've created one on there for a women's Seder that I did for many years up north, and it's pretty user friendly. You click on Kadesh and it gives you a bunch of options, and you click on the one that you want and it puts it onto a page, and then you click the next thing that you want and puts it onto a page. So if you want to get creative with it and write your own stuff, you totally can. But if you also just want to see what's already out there, it's kind of just click and go. So that's another way of doing it.
That sounds like a wonderful idea.
Yeah.
Safaria doing something like that. I got an email from Safaria about checking out their Pesach section, because Safaria, it's an app, their website, safaria.org.
How do you spell it?
I'll put it on the board.
Okay.
It's Haggadot.
And Safaria is the online resource for many sacred texts. You go to their menu and it's Tanakh, and then it's Talmud and Mishnah and so on. And one of the sections is Haggadah.
Right.
So I haven't studied with that, but it's a great resource.
Safaria, I don't know if they've added to it. I looked at the Haggadah actually today to work on this Haggadah slam for next week. Safaria has a Haggadah on it, but I don't think it's as flexible, but also customizable, not even a word, as Haggadot.com. So you can't make it your own. You could print from it or copy and paste from it, but I don't think you can make it your own unless there's something on Safaria I haven't actually seen yet. But Haggadot.com is really a very special resource if people want to fool around with an electronic type Haggadah.
Has anybody tried steering every invitee to Haggadot.com to submit portions?
That's a great idea. I don't know. I know that the past 2 years when my family has done Seder online, we used it. My dad was the one who was managing the Zoom, and he shared his screen, and it was the Haggadah. So that is one way of allowing people to collaborate on it. I don't know off the top of my head if you can, like a Google Doc, add people to it to collaborate on it. But if you're tech savvy enough to kind of look around on the website, I can also look at it later.
Have the same username and password, you could all get into the same doc.
Totally.
Maybe
yes, that's true. That's true. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's a great idea. You also could, by the way, now that I just said this, you could create a Google Doc, right? You just create a Google Doc and tell people they get one page to do whatever part of the Seder, and they create it, and then, you move to the next thing. But Haggadot.com definitely has the kind of drag and go that Google Docs doesn't.
It sounds wonderful. I'm doing an incremental thing.
Yeah.
But my kids and other guests have come up with whole Haggadahs that they want to use.
Great.
They'll think that they found.
Yeah.
And they'll think it's great. This other one will think it's terrible.
Right.
Yeah.
Wouldn't be a Jewish holiday. Wouldn't be a Jewish holiday without that.
So everybody could contribute their own kind of
right.
thing. That would be great.
Yeah, for sure. So this is an article written by Ron Wolfson. I only have 3 copies of this, but I can make another if you guys can just share for right now, and I can make another copy for if either of you want it. So Ron Wolfson is like the master of creativity. And so part of his article is going to give ideas, but also just name creative opportunities for Seder building. This is actually his book, The Art of Jewish Living, and it has in it different ways of getting through the Seder. My family happens to be in this one, lighting candles, which is very sweet. But and it talks about, what different families have done over time, such that you can get ideas that are creative for your family to be able to take on. So this is one resource. I don't know how expensive this book now is. It's old, so it's possible that it is a little bit more expensive than you would like, which is understandable. But it goes through just the different things, and then it says, I'm trying to see if I can find an example of what I'm looking for here. So, yeah, you get to families. I'm trying to stall while I find them. When I opened it, I happened upon, and I turned the page. So yeah, it talks about like hitting people with leeks like they do in Sephardic homes and why you might do that. It makes connections to the Last Supper. If you're going to have people at your Seder who potentially would have more knowledge on that than on the Seder itself. Anyway, okay. Here we go. So here's for example, it says here, like Lou Miller said, just sad, Lou Miller just passed away during COVID about a year ago. Judy Miller says, Marlene Horowitz, Sally Weber, right? All these people are talking about this particular part of Eliyahu Hanavi in their home and what they would do when they pour the glass for Eliyahu. So just gives you some ideas of what other families are doing. But this article, he's just a master when it comes to creativity. So this article is one that will just probably give you tons of ideas.
Can you talk about pouring of the glass for Eliyahu? And if there's any remarkable ideas out there, because everybody's always looking at the glass.
Yeah. So by the time you get to Eliyahu, there's not so much to say or do about it. In my family, we sing just different versions of Eliyahu Hanavi. In the Aftergood family, when we used to go there for Passover, they always had someone dress up as Eliyahu and come in at the moment that you sing Eliyahu Hanavi, so that it's kind of this like play that he's actually joining us. You could very, very easily connect it to, having the idea of bringing people into your home, no matter who they are, and how do we welcome people in and that kind of thing. But it's a part of the Seder that's very hard to get people's attention because it's so close to the end. So I would say whatever you do it quickly. And if you want, you can talk about Miriam, right? So a lot of people at Havdalah will sing Eliyahu Hanavi, but then they'll sing Miriam HaNeviah, and they'll do the same thing about Miriam. So you can talk about Miriam's cup, and you have a cup of water on your Seder plate. This is sometimes people talk about having an orange on their Seder plate, which is not for this part of the Seder, but that might be a moment to make mention of it. The things that I just passed out are specifically for kids, which is why I gave it to the two of you. So, depending on the observance of your family, this might not be something that you are having kids do at the Seder table, but could be something that the kids could take home with them or have with them before the Seder begins. Or if you're starting Seder early, for example, the first night is Friday night, and you're having people come over early and you're not lighting candles until a little bit later, you could have them do it beforehand. I grew up in a family that was not Shomer Chag, and so this kind of thing was happening all the time, with a little bit of, crayons on the table and kids drawing and doing those kinds of things. Even if you are Shomer Chag, but you feel comfortable having kids who don't need to be holding on to those mitzvot, doing that kind of thing, it's a great way of keeping them contained. The other thing about a packet like this is you can use stickers. You don't have to use markers or crayons. So any kind of like bingo board or crossword or not Where's Waldo, but like an I Spy type thing, like you find a matzah or you find a maror, you can do that. There are many, I didn't have any with me in my office that I could find, but there are many kids Haggadot that have those kinds of activities in them. So talking about giving people different Haggadot, the kids could have their own Haggadah such that when you get to Kaddish, they know that that's where they are and they can do whatever the activity is. It typically, if it's a Haggadah, it's typically very conscious of being kosher, so to speak. Like it won't make you write anything or draw anything. It'll use stickers or say, show your parent where the this is on the page or whatever. So those are great things to look into.
Are there coloring books?
There totally are. Yeah. Coloring Haggadah books for sure. Yeah. And anybody who has any questions about any of these things, can email me. Yes, there are great plague masks. There are also great plague plates, that kids can, our animals can use as like their appetizer plates. And you can, ask people which animal do you have or which plague do you have. AJ, you have a question?
What?
Yeah.
So regarding finding the afikomen, I can't think of any logic reason why that has to happen at the end, right?
Well, it has to happen at the end because you wouldn't deal with the matzah until Passover, like the second day comes in.
What do you mean?
But if I find it, it's not eat it.
Well, but you wouldn't break it. Like you wouldn't do yachatz until.
So break it and then put it aside.
Yeah.
And then you hide it.
Yeah.
Look for it, whatever.
Yeah.
But that happens. But finding it usually happens after the meal.
Right.
Is there a problem with hiding it?
Oh, I see what you're saying.
And then having them find it before
Right
everybody eats.
Yeah,
because they are going to be eating while we're doing it.
Yeah. No, probably not.
We're talking little.
Yeah. No, I don't think so. I can't think of a reason why, as long as you're not actually going to eat it. I mean, the whole custom of finding it was to keep the kids engaged and excited to find it. Yeah, I've never heard that as an idea, but it's a very creative one. I like it a lot. My parents used to do it such that the finding of the afikomen was like putting a puzzle together. So you would actually have to find puzzle pieces around the house, and it would spell out like refrigerator, or it would spell out piano bench, and then you knew that that's where the matzah was. But yeah, I think that's a great idea.
I have two other questions.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is, you mentioned specifically you're talking about being inside.
Yeah.
It's entirely probable we're going to do this on a patio.
Yeah, great.
The patio cover, but no door.
Yeah, sure.
So Elijah
opening
the door.
I mean, I think it's similar. Definitely not. There's some, similar to like doing Lechadodi on the field when everybody turns every which way to wonder, like, where are we supposed to go? You would probably just turn towards wherever the entrance might be. You could also turn east if you want. I'm sorry, west if you wanted, which is the way that we turn towards for Lechadodi if there's no door. I think you would just turn either towards like where people walked in or west. Yeah.
Okay. That's third question.
Yeah.
So you mentioned those that are really either adults or activities that are for older children.
Yeah.
What about for
littles?
Like
so my
whole lot of these.
Great. My mom is like brilliant when it comes to the littles at a Seder, actually. So one of the things that she does is every family that shows up to our Seder gets a bag. And in the bag are things that you're going to need throughout the Seder. So she has water bottles in the bag. She has cups for wine in the bag. She has your to-go boxes for the appetizers in the bag.
You start preparing
like the Passover before. Yeah. And then for the littles, she'll have like that Curious George book in the bag. She'll have stickers in the bag. She'll have maybe like stuffed animals for the plagues in the bag. She will have all kinds of activities. Like sometimes she'll put in like depending on the kid's interest, but like Play-Doh or some other kind of tactile something, that a kid could be playing with while other stuff is going on. The other thing that yeah, exactly. Right. And especially for kids who are 3, right, who are not, they're not babies, right? They're not babies, but they're not, they're not in kindergarten, right? They're still little. You could have like Legos or, building blocks, or even, I wouldn't do anything that you could throw, or anything that bounces, because that will
likely, there's a strong possibility you're going to be outside.
Right, exactly. So that, the other thing that my mom has done for little kids is to have like very specific things for them to either eat or enjoy throughout the beginning part of the Seder. So like grape juice instead of wine, but it's already in their bag, so they don't have to go finding it. Like masks for the plagues, like Natalie was talking about, marshmallows for the hail.
You mean like grape juice? You mean like
the little ones? Yeah. Natalie has a gazillion of them upstairs. You can ask her where she got them from. Yeah.
From blood.
Yeah.
We have sometimes taken every day. I think it's ferrous thiazide or something.
Yeah.
It's a red indicator.
Oh.
And then, but it's clear.
Ah.
And then it indicates acid, and then clear vinegar. And you put 2 clear things together, and it suddenly immediately is red.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So the thing that I would also say about kids of all ages, but it could start at 3, is doing things with them that the parents can do that also keep the parents engaged. Because at least in our family, what we realize is that if the kids are not engaged, that means probably the parents also aren't engaged. So you're not only losing the kid, you're also losing the parent. So something like that's an activity that they're going to need their parents' help with, or something that is going to, like the making of the charoset, that the kid can obviously eat, but the parent will have to help them put together. That's the kind of thing that you could definitely do with younger kids that still makes it engaging for the adult. Yeah. But I have a ton of preschool stuff that I can send you electronically that my mom has put together. So just email me and I'll send it. Yeah, Aaron.
On the food.
Yeah.
So I ruled out serving bread or matzah as part of but fruit and vegetables.
Yeah.
Like, could there be little mandarin oranges if somebody wants to eat them? Is there anything that
Sure.
you shouldn't be eating?
No. So
Besides the bread.
Right. So
well, matzah, you have to eat at the right time.
Right.
Start nibbling on it.
So when I was living in Israel, my family has always done like a pretty elaborate appetizers before Seder meal type deal. But when I lived in Israel, a family, their last name is Amit. I was like very much, actually your kids know them, the Amits, Glenda and Aaron Amit.
Sure.
Yeah. So I spent Pesach with them, and at their Seder, Karpas comes up very quickly. So what they did was they started off with like the very traditional karpas of the parsley and the salt water. And then they brought out, I could not even believe my eyes. They brought out all of these appetizers that can be considered karpas because they all have the blessing Borei Pri Ha'adama. So they brought out potato wedges, carrots, broccoli, cauliflower, bananas, celery, I'm trying to think, anything that's borei pri hadama, and you can dip it in anything. So the potato wedges had ketchup, they eat, hummus in Israel on Pesach. So there was like hummus with the carrots, and they also did like chicken wings. I mean, they did things that also weren't karpas, but they started off with the things that you would say borei pri ha'adama over, and then they had things that were a little bit more substantial. Their Seder also went until 2 a.m, and so, you really had to eat real appetizers because dinner didn't come for a while. But it's a really creative way of doing, like, you have guacamole as a thing to dip into. It's a very creative way of doing appetizers that are still connected to the parts of the Seder. You could have radishes out because you can use those for maror, and that could still be something that you're dipping. So anything like that, you can really eat anything that you wouldn't say motzi over, basically. You can eat before the meal. Yeah.
We do the orange wedges for inclusion immediately after karpas. So there's borei pri adama for the karpas, and then there's borei pri ha'etz for the oranges. So that could expand the array of choices.
Totally. If you eat peanut butter on Passover, which some people do, some people don't, you could have, celery and peanut butter, or apples and peanut butter, right? And you could have any kind of
almond butter, which is even better.
Right. You could do almond butter too. Yeah, exactly. So it's actually, that to me is just a very fun way of making sure that people are fed, but also teaching that this isn't just about parsley, right? This is about anything that has the blessing borei pri ha'adama, and how you can use it as a way of symbolizing it. So Renee Bainball said the same thing. I promise you, people will eat, but they're not going to eat, right? They'll.
But also, we're vegetarian. It's
we're
not
doing
like
a vegetarian.
Right. So you're going to have brisket. Right.
If you need a recipe for vegan soup and vegan knedlach, let me know, because I got one from an old Vienna recipe source that I'm planning to make.
You should send it to Rabbi Klickfeld.
I will.
I'm sure he would love that.
Idea.
And for me, because I've got
people who need it.
a way to find out what's falling through on what
very nice.
The ashers are things.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, when you talk about a Seder that goes until 2 a.m.
Yeah.
So, okay, after
I'm dying to.
She's dying to, but I'm trying. What takes so long? If you go through the Seder, if you go through everything in the Haggadah, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 90 minutes, maybe it's even 2 hours because people add some stuff in, this or that.
Yeah.
You guys know?
One year, when Shabbos and Yom Tov were conflicting, we started off by presenting an hour and a half on the 4 children.
Wow.
And then 2 years later, it happened again. And I spent a little bit over an hour without repeating most of what I'd said before on the 4 children. We once had a 15-year-old.
The 4 children.
And people come back to your
My Seder was once reviewed in the Baltimore Jewish newspaper. Very positive.
Really?
Yes.
Not everybody can say that.
What?
Calm down. Nobody's
Yes.
No.
You have to have it. You have to have an audience that's appropriate for it. Because, I'm not going to do that this year when my primary focus is on my two
children, right?
rather young grandchildren.
Right.
But depending on what it is,
One of them would
if you're discussing a lot of things, it can really drag on.
Well, I wanted.
And one thing I was going to say is, she mentioned we recruit. One year, we had a 15-year-old write about the 4 kinds of parents described in
I like
the Torah,
that.
which was based on the 4 children.
That's great.
And was brilliant. And this year, one of the 2 assignments I gave to my 9-year-old grandson is that he has to write 4 new questions in addition to the existing fear conscious, which is mentioned in, I think, Wilson.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
But he's promised me he's writing 4 questions, or he's already done it. I don't know.
Wait, did you
He hasn't
that
said
sort
them
of
to me.
open?
What
kind of guidelines did you give for these new 4 questions? Anything? Or?
But they shouldn't be the existing 4 questions.
Right.
I'm confident he'll do something appropriate for a 9-year-old to do. And one of his parents is a rabbi, so if he feels like he needs help, he can ask him or the other one.
And I like that about kids writing them.
What I wanted to
that was
add,
a 15-year-old. It was a more sophisticated age.
What I wanted to add into this discussion is sometimes just if Pesach starts late and the family is waiting until, Shabbos is over or whatever to sit down, you don't sit down to start till 8:30.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, that's not true for us, but I've heard of people who do that.
Yeah.
And the conversation, depending again on who's there, can go on for a long time. And I do have to add, when people the next day, if they come to shul at all, are like, I was up till 3 in the morning. It's like, are you bragging or
right. I would say that Magi can take a really long time, right? You could do every word, right? I've never, I guess at the Amit's house, we did do every word, but in my family, we've never done every word. But also if you're sitting at a table of people who are interested in like the Torah behind the different aspects of the Haggadah, you could go down many different rabbit holes that could have you seated talking about the story of, the Exodus for a very long time. And proof texts and, the Talmud says and this, that, and the other thing. So that was the only Seder that I went to that really lasted that long. And Rachel's right. It started at 9 p.m. So, it's not starting at 6:30 and ending at 2 a.m.
Once we wheeled a TV in on a stand.
Yeah.
So that everybody could see it in the room.
Yeah.
And found, I think we had to hook it up to a computer.
Yeah.
And got the story of Passover.
Yeah.
And it, narrated, produced, and all the pictures.
Totally.
And I think the kids, everybody really engaged by it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there is definitely something, if a family is comfortable with using technology or using, like art, there's many, many things that you can do that will keep everybody very engaged. You could play YouTube videos of different songs. You could have little snippets of like Prince of Egypt playing at different times. You could do many different things that aren't found in a book, which is great. And then if you're dealing with people who won't do that or can't do that, then you get rid of those creative options and you come up with your own. But so I was going to say something about going late doesn't. Rachel's right. Like there's nothing that says that you should go late or that there's like a mitzvah. It's not Shavuot, right? You're not supposed to stay up all night. It's just that I think it became this kind of this contest of, if you went really late, you probably did the most that you could do. But I don't actually think that's necessarily true. Yeah. I mean, I think if people get a lot out of their Seder and they end at a reasonable hour, awesome. Because you get to go to bed, which is Very exciting.
I did want to add to what Aaron said. There are people for whom a long Seder is not appropriate.
Right.
Read my parents, who basically stopped coming to our Seders.
Wow.
Because they didn't want to
be there that long.
Wow.
And
to this day, I feel really sad about that they didn't come. But what we ended up doing was having them another time during Passover.
Yeah.
Sunday brunch or Shabbos Pesach or something like that.
Yeah.
So that we could share part of the holiday where they didn't need to sit for a few hours.
That is the other really nice thing about two Seders, right? Like in my family, the first night Seder was very traditional. My grandfather led it in a formal dining room, sitting at a table, start to finish, the whole thing. We started in the sitting room, and that's where we looked at the beautiful David Maas Haggadah, and then we went into the formal dining room, and that's where we actually started the Seder. And that was a very long, late night. Now, I actually missed that because of the nostalgia of it. But the second night was always my parents led it. It started extremely early, and it was for kids very specifically. That's obviously changed given the makeup of our family now. But that's, there's also that when you're dealing with different kinds of family members, maybe one night is a little bit more traditional and long, and the other night is a little bit more creative, inclusive, and potentially shorter, though it could also be long, while creative and inclusive.
It's probably good to let your guests know a little bit what to expect too.
Totally.
Set the tone and everything.
My mom sends out an invitation every year that has the theme of the night, like what's going to be kind of the tone of what's going on, and then the assignments that people are going to take.
Does she consult?
Does she consult? She, I said this, I think before you arrived, I said that the last year when I taught this class, I taught it with my mom, because my mom and dad for a million years, well, I guess 33 years, have been doing this, every single year, and it's different every single year. She totally would talk to you about it. She loves it. I mean, as much as I love it, but I get that love for it from her. She's an educator through and through, extremely creative, would, just ideas pop into her head. She's extremely, extremely creative. And especially with kids, she's an ECC director. So especially when it comes to little kids, she's the preschool director at Westwood Hills Charter Preschool, which is on LaGrange in Westwood. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Yeah, AJ.
This is really good story. Like I know.
Yeah.
Everybody's got all of these.
Yeah.
And the focus, at least what we've been talking about, usually what the Seder is about, except that the other attending format and with Jerry Berman there, there's another story in the Haggadah, and it's really the story of the Haggadah, right? And it is an all-night story. Is there a book that somebody has really gone through and developed the history of that time period?
I think this one actually does that quite a bit. Let me look and see. This is,
not a history of Haggadah, but a history of the story with the real story in the Haggadah is about the rabbis and what they're doing.
This one does not do that. I thought it might.
The story, if you think about the way that the Haggadah is put together, it tells you more about the rabbis of the Mishnaic period.
That's right.
This has a little bit of it in the back.
Then, as much as it tells you about the Exodus.
Got it.
Tells you everything about the Exodus.
Yeah, I don't know. Other than that book there, I'm not sure if there's one that, this is, This is a little bit more of like how to, what different things mean, but not the rabbi's piece. There's a family guide, so that won't have it.
The Mishnah has a section on Pesachim.
Oh, yeah.
That's kind of the outline of a Seder done in a somewhat different order, but that I understand to be kind of the predecessor text.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, Mishnah Pesachim definitely has like the texts that make up a Haggadah, but I think what AJ's talking about is if there was some kind of Haggadah that went through like kind of like the Rashi commentary, not actually Rashi, but like on the Haggadah itself.
Well, this is more of what you have in mind. My question was really more on the order of the historical events around that were going on.
I can look it up for you.
About which I could probably put it together myself, but it would take time, and I just don't have time right now.
I'll look it up for you because I'd be interested to know.
There's one that right after the story about the 4 rabbis who spend all night talks about a different 4 rabbis who spend all night talking about different things. One of whom is Rabbi Gamliel.
Right. Yeah, I'll have to look into that and see. I'm not sure.
The reason for obvious interest is the code. Right, code within the code.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, what were they really
getting at and talking about? Sure.
Okay, ask this.
Yes, strategic question.
We typically have a before dinner Seder, and then we interrupt the Seder pretty completely for the meal.
Okay.
And then pick up the Seder.
Yeah, sure.
Is there a way to make the meal?
Yeah.
Tani does such a great job with the meal.
Yeah.
It goes on.
Sure.
Is there some way to integrate the meal as part of the Seder so that you don't have, it's not an interruption, it's just a continuous.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, if you want to make the meal something that kind of still continues the Seder on, you could decide to do parts of Magid that, again, similar to the parts that you could do before Kadesh, to do parts of Magid over dinner, right? You could talk about different parts of the story over dinner as opposed to in their kind of rightful place in Magid. You also could choose to have some of the conversation, even if you do Magid before, to have some of the conversation or maybe some of the pieces that you would have, that you would have assigned out to people happen during dinner so that as people are eating, they're also conversing, and that doesn't happen before dinner, but rather around the dinner table. So that's definitely possible. That's a great idea.
There are some of the guys out there, I know they use this one at the Temple of Kiva in Culver City, that when you get to explaining Pesach, matzah, and more, they explain matzah and then eat the matzah. And do the blessing and eat the matzah. And then they explain the more.
Oh, interesting.
And do the blessing and eat the more. And then they explain the Pesach and then they eat the Hillel sandwich. And the whole meal where it is in the Haggadah, sandwiched by Hillel. The idea is that the food you eat is a part of your praise for God. It really is a part of Hillel.
That's great. I've never seen that. I like that a lot. Yeah, that's a very integrative way of doing the whole Seder, right? Like as soon as you talk about the thing, you actually do the thing. Yeah. That's great. I really like that.
The reform Haggadot.
It's possible. I don't think I have a.
There's even a fun piece about how we didn't have time to make regular cookies, and so they put together egg whites and coconut, and they had to make macaroons. It's very funny. You could do that to introduce dessert.
That's great. That's great.
Didn't have time to make Toll House.
Right. That's great. So this is obviously, there are so many more ideas than the ones that I just gave you, and hopefully this allows you to kind of walk away with your wheels turning. please feel free to email me. I'm also happy to, when I respond to you, CC my mom and have her give you some ideas also if you're interested in her ideas. I do have a Google folder full of stuff from last year, also from the year before, because when Passover happened the year before, COVID had just started. And so I created a whole resource bank for Beth on Google, on a Google Drive. So if you're interested in any of that, even to just thumb through it, even if you're not going to print anything to use, just email me and let me know. And I'm happy to share that folder with you. And just have fun with it. I mean, Passover is really all about telling a story, asking questions, and enjoying the people around your table. So, short of doing those things and, following the rubric that a book is going to give you, no matter which book you're using, you're doing the Seder correctly. So have fun with it, and just enjoy being able to engage the people who are with you. Make the first night and the second night different, because that'll be interesting to you. And delegate, delegate to have people, help out and participate, because that'll make it also interesting for them. So, I hope that you all have meaningful and creative Seders, and let me know what you do, because I get a lot of my ideas also from other people's Sedarim and rituals. So, you're so welcome. Have a great night. I'm so glad that it was such a nice little intimate crowd.
You have been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast site or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about Temple Beth Am Los Angeles, go to tbala.org.